Take one. The Final Frontier. My name is Matthew Newhall, and I'm a computer specialist and a science fiction author. I'd like to discuss some novel theories in psychology and economics. I've included links with more details below. This talk was originally created for the Icon Science Fiction Convention in New York. Unfortunately, this convention was canceled for 2013. Rather than abandon it, I'm sharing it with you. Please pass this video along. This is licensed under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution license, so feel free to share, add graphics, music, etc. Star Trek, a model Type 1 civilization. How do we get there? Gene Roddenberry was a genius. I'm not sure if he realized how important his vision of humanity was. Anyone who has watched more than a few episodes of any of the variants of the series Star Trek will recognize his vision. He depicted humanity as he saw it could be. He depicted humanity in a Type 1 civilization. What is a Type 1 civilization? It is simply how humanity acted in the various Star Trek shows. Many people had studied every detail of that universe, trying to decode exactly how we got from this to that. They may succeed in creating miniature societies that seem just like Starfleet, but as they grow, they eventually fail. I used to dismiss Star Trek as a fantasy. I believe that mankind will never work together and act like that. In a way, such dismissal is quite logical. Sure, a single person from our time would likely adapt to such a society if tossed through a time portal. But changing our entire society at once is another matter. A popular idiom is that a person is logical, but people are not. Turns out this is the opposite from the truth. Did you catch that? I just said a person is illogical, and people are logical. How could we, the concerned, the civic-minded, the geeks in the room, be so wrong about the people among us? Duh, we're logical. I have proposed that deep inside of most of us, before the dawn of civilization, a mutation came about. A human being was born with an imagination. One like the one we think with today. And then at some inopportune time, that person used their pretend world, their goofy, wasteful inner space, to think about how some other prehistoric person felt. They began to form a conscience, much like we have now. Any guesses how it went, this conscience thing? I'd say it was a disaster. Every time they stuck their neck out to help another person, they nearly got it cut off. In other words, it was just like high school. But imagination persisted, and they remained illogical and irrational. They couldn't help it, so they spent most of their short cave life with a kick-me sign on their back. The hairy, grunting locker room deathmatch soldiered on. So did our helpless losers. In a moment of weakness, they even had sex. The generations passed, and the ranks of our stealthy Napoleon Dynamite prototypes grew. They learned to find each other and trade favors and goods. They even played a primitive form of cave flux on pieces of tree bark. One day, they grew tired of the grunters doing the grunters smelly cave laundry. So they made a stand. One cave nerd stuck his neck out for another cave nerd. They stood up for each other, and the hairy grunters chased them into the woods. Bad idea. Not very rational. Silly cave nerds. Then it got interesting. Turns out being smart, and specifically having an imagination, meant you built awesome gadgets and had lots of time to screw around. Which usually meant building more gadgets. Since you could imagine how other people felt, you could trust them. Which was good, because it was hard work not to trust each other. Of course, the hairy grunters were still lurking in the woods, and the big nerds went into security and built more technologies to suit their own needs. Early forms of math and chemistry. Cities and civilizations were born from an illogical, irrational trust of each other. The original breed of Homo sapiens, the hairy grunters, were not that important anymore. Then history happened. Now we're here. What does it have to do with Star Trek? Everything. What happened to your Starfleet Cub? Did it fall apart? Why did it fall apart? Egos, schedules, life's necessities. I'm not just talking about your club. I'm talking about everything from a computer club on up to Google, of the United States of America. The trust it starts to fray. But why? Why else? It's betrayed. Those irrational humans are only trusting to a point. Some people do deeply selfish things. Corruption sets in. Eventually self-preservation takes over. A personal logic kicks in. Kicking and screaming in protest. Eventually people give up on their society and turn on the people around them. Money and property are a promise. You spent the year building a gadget and your society agrees not to steal it. You invest your resources into making something better. You loan yourself out. It's a big risk. And an irrational, illogical one. But that gadget you invented cranks out 3 times the widgets. Cheap widgets are a boon to society. So it's logical for people to promise to protect your property, but illogical to risk investing since you have no control over other people. See why the idiom is the opposite from the truth? We take huge risks all the time. The risks are very high, but you take that risk anyway. Why? You can't help it. There's that silly imagination again. Stepping in and showing you a better world. Like Star Trek. So, if everyone is irrational, where does that risk come from? We all trust each other, more or less. Look carefully at the Federation, humans, and Star Trek. The humans and the Federation are all trying to do the right thing. They all share that common irrational trust that we share. It's not all peaceful progress, but rather a very exciting universe. All kinds of conflict. Some of it is random, a meteor shower, an accident, a death, an error. Sometimes it's sabotage, theft and depraved indifference, but it's almost never a human acting selfishly, acting logically only to themselves. It's an alien or an evil life force. The humans are always cooperating, at least trying to. Their trust seems unbreakable. Some people are not like us. Some people, a small group, are just like the popular idiom says. They are logical to their own needs. They are selfish. They could care less about society. They are psychopaths. Gene Roddenberry depicted a global society without psychopaths. Psychopaths are only recently defined to us, with good information only coming in the past 30 years or so. They are simply defined as people with no empathy. The distribution mimics genetic disease, a recessive gene to be specific. Therefore, I believe they are the original breed of human before us. Why before us? Because they are a subset of humans as we know them. The humans we know are both selfish and giving. We cooperate and compete. They only compete. Recently, with the advent of the MRI, we can positively identify them. When presented with emotionally charged words, we react and they don't. Reading the words rape and kill and drugs make our brains light up like Christmas trees. This is why I've come to think that they do not share the same breadth of imagination we do. In my opinion, imagination is the source of empathy. They will never walk a mile in our shoes in their minds simply because they can't. A simplistic way to imagine yourself as them is to remove your conscience. Imagine Captain Kirk or Picard or their crews navigating the complexity of the societies at the edge of the known universe without any sense of cooperation or ethics. Oh, compassion or ethics, excuse me. Not only would both crews be killed many times over, the entire known universe would have been a war. I'm sure your imagination is racing by now, most of you anyway. Can I be trusted? For the rest of this talk, I'm going to open your minds and pretend I am addressing you on the Enterprise. Pick your own favorite. You would trust me then, wouldn't you? Of course. You would trust every single human being around you to do the right thing to the best of their ability. Liberating, isn't it? Worth a thought experiment, I'd say. Now, if I were a mysterious space cloud, or an alien, or the occasional purebred Vulcan saboteur, you could almost be sure I was trying to blow up the ship and possibly Earth. But not a native human. This seems painfully unrealistic, doesn't it seem? People betray each other all the time on Earth. We bend over backward to avoid the liar, the thief, the cheater. Where are they in Star Trek? Sure, some lie, cheat, and steal. When they get caught, they always turn out to be well-intentioned, or at least doing the best they can for the people around them. It seems almost naive, but it's not. It's brilliant. Mr. Spock entertains us by dancing around the fundamental problem. Logic. Logic versus emotion. He struggles between his uncontrollable joy, compassion, anger, and other emotions, approaching problems from his conscious, logical mind. This is, beyond the shadow of a doubt, a commentary on the empathic human condition. I use the word empath here, not to indicate telepathy like Deanna Troi, though I can't rule that out, but a human who has emotional metadata recalls it every time as part of their memory. In other words, a conscience. A human who is not a psychopath. Logic, as Mr. Roddenberry occasionally hints, is not a panacea. How did the Vulcans decide to dedicate themselves to logic after a brutal, emotionally charged war that nearly destroyed their planet and species? It's hard to believe that the Vulcan logic was suddenly grafted onto their brains like some computer upgrade. No, it was always there. But absent external direction, the logical mind serves itself, not the common good. Not to deviate too far, but Isaac Asimov backs up this idea with his laws of robotics. Without an irrational conscience like ours, a robot is reduced to pure selfish logic. You may say, hey, wait a minute. Listening to me, you may have observed that we humans don't have some great external morality either. Sure, we have societal expectations, don't we? But nothing uniform, nothing overwhelming. And this is curious. Why do we have compassion? Eventually, our parents stop watching us. The prospect of caught lying, cheating, or stealing goes down as we mature. It's not like we don't have freedom of will. Come to think of it, isn't that why the Vulcans have done to themselves? Removed all higher decision-making from their people? But we still have a choice. Cheating is easy. Fooling people is easy. Almost too easy. Are humans schlubs? Fools? Naive? We are fools, and we should embrace it. Our trust of each other can have terrible personal consequences. Identity theft, date rape, Ponzi schemes, rickrolling. But for society, it's almost unimaginable. Economics, the study of the economy, better known as trading work, is dreadfully boring. Have you noticed? There's no money in Star Trek. How can that be? How can there be an economy without a way to store work, better known as money? It's visionary. If you trust everyone, you don't need it. Simply ask someone what they have done and they will tell you. When your data about work is reliable, you can quantify cost on the fly. I'm not talking about communism. That's top-down, forced by governments and gulags and guns. I'm talking about a fundamental understanding between nearly every human on the planet. Maybe I need to back up a bit here. You may not have wrapped your head around the fundamentals of economics now. Don't worry, it's actually pretty simple. When a person or people make more than one of something, they often get better at it. Being better at it means less effort, materials, and time. In other words, it's less expensive to produce. This is known as the economy of scale. In a cynic's view, economy of scale is why humans bother with each other at all. Well, that and sex, that is. Problem is, we don't need very many of any one thing in isolation, so we never get very good at making one thing. But if we could just trust that other people will give us something in exchange for what we build and not just take it, we might make more than we need and profit. This is known as specialization or investment. Okay, you're done. You know the fundamentals of economics. Economy of scale and investment. Told you it wouldn't be bad. But even with the most core concepts, you already find a hard thing to understand. Why the hell would anyone trust the people around them? They won't invest or specialize if they don't. And if they don't invest, the economy of scale never happens. Economies like to write books on this, but it's actually really simple. Trust. To the point of being a fool. Psychopaths act like other animals, always looking for the easy path, the quick solution, but we stick our necks out for each other. To a fault. The community is as important, if not more important, to ourselves than ourselves. We can't help it. Empathic humans are irrational. It's our genetics. Bad for a person, but great for the planet. The geek shall inherit the earth. We hope. Sounds like a utopia, doesn't it? A wise teacher of mine once told me that defining utopia is simple. Peaceful anarchy. Take what you want, give what you want. Star Trek is defining utopia. I mean, sure, they have a chain of command, rules, and schedules, but what do you think the Enterprise is? A cabin in the woods? It's a warship. They're in the military. Yeah, I know they're explorers, too. They need to be completely organized in order to succeed in defense and attack. We're not just seeing utopia, but we're seeing the most rigid structure it has to offer. It's crazy, right? A typical desk job seems more acrimonious. Military surely means yelling at each other and pushing each other to the brink. The bridge and the rest of the Enterprise just seem to flow. More like a philosophy mixture with an occasional phaser practice. How trusted friends act together. So, let's say I'm correct. The psychopaths own the lion's share of destructive human behavior. If their self-directed logic is the main spanner in economic investment, the humans would be vastly more productive if they no longer had such waste. This would unite humanity, mainly comprising compromising, trusting humans, and the additional, non-linear, I might add, economy of scale would take us to the stars. What do we do? How do we get there? We probably need to talk more about what we can't and won't do first. We're all geeks, so let's talk science. There is good reason to think the basis for psychopathy is genetic. Psychopaths often display, even spell out their condition as young children. When raised in affluent, reasonable, loving, nurturing environments, they can display depraved indifference, a lack of emotion, and euphoria and cruelty. They lack an empathic expression or metadata is likely both ubiquitous and recessive. Two empathic parents can have a psychopathic child, even after many generations without one. Likewise, two psychopathic parents can have an empathic child. This is important because no purge will be effective. Even if every psychopath were eliminated from the face of the planet, more would be born. They are part of us. Does the idea of a purge turn your stomach? Mine too. It's normal for us. So not only will it not work, but it's just not in us. Genocide is by definition an unconscionable act. We have a conscience. This is not who we are. Not to mention, you probably have a family member who you love, who is a psychopath. You know who they are. The real problem comes when a psychopath gains control over another human being. This power enables their selfish deceptions. It is the chief force undermining our trust. It is blocking our ability to use the full resources of our economy of scale, of Earth, and to the benefit of humanity. They use promises, money, and government, and broadcast to redirect our goods and services, and especially our time. We need those resources. We all know how humanity were discovered by the Vulcans. We invented a warp drive. They were allowed to bring us into the fold. A warp drive may still be our real-world defining moment. The moment when we join a larger universe of interstellar intelligence and travel. I propose that the key technology came along before that. It is now 30 years in our past. Only now are we fully grasping what it will allow us to do. I mentioned it before, the MRI. The device that will allow humanity to travel among the stars by helping us to disallow those who would waste our resources and derail our progress. The key to the stars is ending waste. The key to that is screening. The mind races. Remember, I'm addressing you from the deck of the Enterprise. I and all the people around you are trying to the best of our ability to help humanity. We are of good conscience and will not use this data to persecute them. It's self-defining. That is not who we are. That is who they are. I would not be surprised in hindsight to discover that it has never been us behind the horrors of history. It has always been them. I suggest that Earth, in our Star Trek future, still contains some meaningful percentage of psychopaths. Sure, as humans had reproductive rights, they had jobs and residences and other rights too. But never in the military, never in a civic role as a politician, never as a CEO or an auditor or even a supervisor. They contributed and cared for themselves, but were self or otherwise employed in only technical roles. A farmer, a repairman, a salesman. No direct reports allowed. No singular authority over data. Fellow humans, we can have that future. It is no longer mysterious and distant, but clearly obtainable. We will show them the compassion that defines humanity without a destructive or dehumanizing purge. Traveling with light is not that far off, but first, we, all of us, must understand ourselves. In the nuclear age, we have no other choice. If this seems plausible to you, please pass this along. If you prefer a transcript, and supporting ideas are available. I will try to answer questions and comment. Thank you for your time.